Hey, good afternoon, everybody. And before we get started, I'd like to ask you all to do me a solid favor, and that's like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. Also, ladies and gentlemen, please click on the link in the description, as well as on my homepage, if you will, to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube. You can find me at all your favorite audio and video podcast affiliates, like iTunes, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, Radio Public, and to an extent Sirius XM, and maybe in the near future, because of the partnership with Spotify, potentially Netflix. Also, ladies and gentlemen, please check me out at other alternative video outlets outside of YouTube like Rumble, Dailymotion, VENMO, and Odyssey. I'm also on Twitch.tv and Kick.com, mostly Twitch.tv. Kick.com is a backup just in case. Also, I'm also on Patreon. That'll get restarted real soon, so please check that out. Basically, it'll be the same as late last year when I restarted it, to where basically you will get content 24 to 48 hours before it shows up on YouTube or any other video outlet on Patreon. So basically, if you want to see it before anybody else, it'll be on Patreon first, and then about a day or two later, it'll be on YouTube or any other video platforms. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I'm on other creative outlets like DeviantArt at BVW1979, for Affinity at BW1979, and InkBuddy.com, but InkBuddy.net, at BW Rosette. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I have a couple of online stores. I have a Fourth Wall store and a Teespring store. The links to those in the description. Fourth Wall store is in the middle of the description box. Teespring is at the bottom. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I will have a couple of affiliated stores listed, especially with the subject of today's video. You will see basically some stuff there related, especially when it comes to Valentine's Day. You can click on those, get something for yourself, your loved one, your family members, friends, co-workers, whoever you feel deserves to have a Valentine. Go ahead and click on the link for the affiliated stores, and you should be able to find something there, as well as you'll be helping me out as well via commissions. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I'm on social media, so you can find me at outlets like TikTok, Twitter, aka X.com, and Blue Sky, all at BW Rosses. Also, ladies and gentlemen, during the live video premiere, you can put your comments in the live chat if you would like to do so, and along with your live chat comments, you can also basically super chat as well. Super chats are going to be on, so you can get your comments in, as well as help out by donating whatever you can in the super chats. Whatever you can do is really helpful. It'd be greatly appreciative. Also, ladies and gentlemen, speaking of that, before I forget, I do have a Cash App and a Venmo. That helps me out directly, so if you want to do that, it'd be greatly appreciative as well. And also, during the live video premiere and afterwards, the comment section will be open. And after the live video premiere, if you don't get here in time for that and you still want to help donate, Super Thanks will be open as well. So please get those donations in that way in the Super Thanks if you still want to help out. But with that said, let's get on to the topic at hand. So, with Valentine's Day this year dropping on a weekend, it basically means everybody's going to use the Valentine's Day / President's Day weekend as a time to not only, especially if you're with your loved one, have a good time, if you know what I mean, but also go on maybe on a little bit of a mini vacation. Kind of like a Valentine's gift, belated to much belated gift, if you will, Christmas-wise, for you and your family maybe, and who knows. Basically it's one of those rare times to where you get to celebrate love, and you get to have an extra day off from work and school, if you know what I mean. But with that said, though, when it comes to Valentine's Day, when it comes to fiction, there's a lot of couples, that we are fans of. And I've talked about my favorites all the time. I have. And this obviously is going to be no different. But I wanted to basically do this to kind of let you know about the couples that I do support, even if you don't, and give you a reason why. And again, I probably have done this before, but consider this kind of like the 2026 edition. So, with that said, I'm going to list off 5, not 10, but 5 couples that I do support. And I'm going to give you a reason as to why. So, first up is a couple, a ship, if you will, that I have supported. And I know some people argue, as you can see who they are, that There is no way this would have happened because they basically grew up like siblings. You are free to your opinion on that because a lot of people do agree in that perspective. But there's also those that go the other way. They actually do look at these two as what potentially could have been a romance when they got older. And of course, like I said, as you can see, we're talking about Cubbi and Sunni from the event Disney's Adventures of the Gummy Bears. Now I know they basically teased Sunni with being with Buddy Barbic, kind of teased that little thing there. And of course, one of the ongoing little, I guess you could say, plots, kind of side plots, whatever you want to call it, is Sunni wanting to be with Gusto, which, basically when they teased the potentiality of that in Rocking Chair Bear, I could see that it would make sense. I could see that. But honestly, I think we all can agree that this is Disney we're talking about, right? That Disney, then and even now, should they have ever decided or potentially decide to go in this direction for, let's say, a future reboot or project, I don't think any of us would disagree that knowing Disney, they'd probably go down the more predictable route, or route, if you will. And that predictable route or route is essentially Cubbi and Sunni growing up and getting together. I mean, to a lot of folks, like I said, it may not seem like it would make sense, but when you really think about the pairing itself, it kind of, in a way, from a story perspective, could actually work. It could actually work, especially if you want to age the characters up. And also, I want you to think about this too. How many times were they always paired together? You could have had Sunni get paired up with Tummy. You could have had Tummy and Cubbi paired up more so than Sunni and Cubbi, and Sunni and Tummy more so than Cubbi and her. But it was mostly all the time them. They always had a connection. Like they just had to be around each other to enjoy life, to find common ground. I mean, yeah, in the show they would tease each other, and they would probably get on not probably, but they would get on each other's nerves. But they were always looking out for each other. They were. Let me tell you about this. Let's talk about a gummy in a gilded cage. In that episode, Sunni has this lovely singing voice. She gets captured by these vultures. And the king wants her to sing for his entertainment and to help him rest, to help him sleep. So she's held prisoner. And what happens? Gruffy, Cubbi, and Sunni go to her aid. And when Gruffy and Cubbi reach the cavern where she's held captive, and basically Cubbi hears her and everything, singing, and she's kind of getting like a little sick, like basically not sounding good, right? What does Cubbi say? He says, "I'm going to save her." He instantly wants to go to her rescue. That's not typically, I wouldn't say it's not sibling love, because it is, there is siblings that do that. But, in fiction as well. But there's also someone that cares about somebody as more than just as a sibling-like, I guess you could say roommate, or dormmate, or glenmate, if you will. That's somebody that actually has more feelings for that character than you can or not prospect, but you can predict, even say. And when he does free her and everything, she does the whole, like, my hero kind of gesture, and then they kind of, like, when they're hugging, they kind of, like, rub their heads together a little bit, and it's like, come on. Can you not have enough evidence there to kind of allude to the fact that you're hinting at something if you want to go any further? It's just one of those scenarios that when you look at it, honestly, when you look at it honestly, you know that if Disney wanted to, they would do it. And that's why I support it. Because I feel that the more you show something like that, the more you're honestly hinting that you're going to go in that direction. Now, I know people might say, well, they can show a lot of that, but they might pivot. That's true. They might. But honestly, I look at this back then in the early 80s, mid 80s up to when it ended in the early 90s. I look at that as if, Disney, with the various hugs and embraces and being there for each other, those moments in the show, to me, I just think honestly, Disney wanted, like I think honestly, if Disney, been able to do what they wanted to do, because, a little story, a little known fact here, folks, little known fact. Disney wanted, honestly, this is what I understand. Disney wanted to do something of not a cinematic universe, but a cinematic series of movies based on their Disney Afternoon properties. And of course, they started with DuckTales, and they were going to have some other DuckTales movies lined up. But they also had a Rescue Rangers movie, a Darkwing Duck, and a Tailspin. And I think even down the pipelines, they had a Gummy Bears movie. And had they gotten to that point, and this is a what-if scenario of this, thinking of what could have been scenario, had they gotten to that point, then I wouldn't be surprised if they had done that. The movie would have had the characters aged up, and it would have romantically put them together. But that's only if, essentially, they would have been, I guess you could say, able to get to that point, able to get to that, goal, if you will. But it never happened. But another thing that always made me know that this potentially could be, an opportunity they would, run with, a direction they would go in, is look at the two human friends, Calvin and Calla. Why would you pair Cubbi and Sunni with the two humans that are about the same age and obviously have an attraction towards each other? Because we see it in the show. We do. I think Calla's even kissed Calvin on the cheek a couple of times. So, why pair them up? You're giving the humans, and them best friends, that, can understand each other and hang out with each other and stuff like that. Have fun with each other. And that's great. But, why would you do it when knowing that those humans have a thing for each other? Why do it? Because obviously you were planting the seeds. You were essentially putting the little hints and Easter eggs in there that what you see what you're getting with the human characters might just, spill on over to the gummy characters they're friends with, especially as they get older. Which is why, when I think about the possibilities of what could have been, had, like I said, Disney probably gone through what they wanted to do, in doing these cinematic movies, a series of movies with the Disney Afternoon shows, Gummy Bears, I think, would have been a show that would have gotten that treatment as well. And I think that's probably when it would have happened. Not only would we see aged up Cubbi and Sunni, we would have seen them get together. To me, like I said, the evidence, the hints and everything, and I say this a lot, and I'm going to be saying it again throughout this video with other couples, but to me, it's just too blatantly obvious from the get-go. Too blatantly obvious from the get-go that you wanted to do something with these two. You did. And again, like I said earlier, I know people might say they were more like siblings. That's true. Again, like I said earlier, you have your opinion to that belief. You do. But how many times do siblings, honestly, always, hang out with each other, when they have maybe someone that's in the middle age of them, like Tummy, or now they got these other friends they can hang out with, like Calla and Calvin, or when they're in Usela, with, the Barbics and everything. It's like, why always pair them up outside of the fact that they're the two youngest? And you have one that basically starts crushing on, the gummy that gets found on that island, Gusto. Why do that? I mean, it doesn't add up. If you're going to not go that route with them, then you shouldn't have them always together. I'm just saying. I'm just saying, but To me, I think this is just why I, along with other people, and there's are other fans, believe it or not, support this ship. So basically, that's how we're starting off here. Starting off here by me talking about why I support this, ship, or what could have been a potential ship with Cubby and Sunny, because it was just too much evidence, and I think anybody listening to this, whether they agree with it or not, I think, in honest opinion wise, you might kind of see. You go back and watch the show, is what I'm saying. But you probably, by doing so, you'll probably see exactly what I'm talking about, and you may or may not agree. But with that said, let's get on to the next couple. Alright, so the next couple I'm going to talk about, and by the way, it's not going to be in any order, I'm just listing them off. But the next couple I'm going to talk about here, you could see, it's obvious, I'm not going to do a list without talking about Rarity, short for Spike and Rarity from My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Now, I've gone on record, for those of you that have followed this channel, I've gone on record in stating that, this pairing just feels like something that, works. And obviously, when you look at in between all of the writers, all the head writers behind the scenes, from Lauren Faust to Megan McCarthy to Nicole Dubuque, you can all kind of agree that they understood the dynamic between Spike and Rarity. More so Lauren and Nicole than Megan. Let's be honest. Because Megan McCarthy, she understood it, and we had the moments in there, there's no doubt. But you can definitely tell that she wanted to try to get away from that as much as she could. But again, she still understood the assignment. Like, when you have an opportunity, put it in there. Put some kind of acknowledgement that, hey, these two have a friendship that's closer than than being regular friends. It's not romantic, romantically, close, but it's kind of like borderline. And I think that's when McCarthy kind of decided, okay, if I'm going to put that in there, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to basically put it like on the borderline, if you know what I mean. And I have to give her credit. That's exactly what she did. But when you look at Lauren Faust and you look at Nicole Dubuque, there's one difference between them and Megan McCarthy that is completely visually obvious. You see, when McCarthy was in charge, never once did Rarity ever kiss Spike on the cheek. Never once. When Nicole took over in the latter seasons, and even when Lauren started out as well, guess what? Rarity kissed Spike on the cheek. She did. And twice in one episode, of course. And then, of course, in Best Gift Ever. And it shows you that both Lauren and Nicole understood that if you're going to go this route and tease, that Spike has a thing for Rarity, then you need to at least show some kind of evidence, that not only is she aware of it, but she's willingly accepting it. Accepting the fact that here's somebody that actually cares about her and loves her beyond just being a friend, And that's cool to see. That's cool to see. And when you look at the latter portion of the series, and when Dubuque took over, it was more obvious than I think anybody could really agree upon. And that's a fact. Because when you compare Megan McCarthy's run to Nicole Dubuque's run, if you will, it's obvious Nicole Dubuque understood there are fans of this ship. Just like Lauren Faust kind of understood that basically, even though she wasn't expecting it, and she could joke around like, oh, that was never the case and all that, and obviously you could tell she was joking around when she put some of those comments out a few years ago. Like I said, they understood that they were the fan base. They were support for this pairing, and that you need to give it some kind of payoff, some kind of recognition, and both did. And like I said, you compare them with Megan McCarthy's run, and yeah, she gave moments in there. There's no doubt. I'm not going to deny that. But like I said, basically, if you were to rank it, if you will, Dubuque would be at number 1, Faust would be at number 2, and McCarthy would be at number 3 when it comes to acknowledging, this pairing. And again, Best Gift Ever is a good example of it. Another episode which some people may or may not like, Dragon Drop. That's an episode that's totally, focused on it. I mean, basically, when you really think about Dragon Drop as an episode, when it comes to Rarity, when you really think about it, it's essentially an episode. The underlining tone is Rarity's now realizing, because here you have Spike spending a lot of time with Gabby. Gabby from the Fault in All Cutie Marks episode. He's spending time with her, right? He's kind of becoming best friends with her and stuff like that. And Rarity's becoming green-eyed, kind of becoming like a green-eyed, envy, jealousy like pony, unicorn. And basically, it's here, the underlining tone, whether you believe it or not, or agree with it or not, is she realizes that Spike means the world to her because, like Spike was with her, she is now with Spike. She has a thing for Spike. And, just like Spike has a thing for her. That is why when you look at her expressions, look how everything is just set up, especially the ending. It's basically a dead giveaway at the fact that it was very subtly hinting at that these two, in a way, ended up together finally. And again, I get that some fans, like I mentioned with Sunni and Cubby, I get some fans would not acknowledge that, and some fans have the reasoning as to why it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. But let me explain this once and for all, because a lot of people have argued this. Spike, yes, was born out of an egg, okay? But Twilight, when she hatched him, was the equivalent of, let's say, a prodigy student of the age of 5 or 6, okay? And when she hatched Spike, people might say, oh, Spike's basically 4 or 5 years younger than her, or 6 years younger than her, and that makes reasonable sense, right? Here's the thing. When it comes to mythical creatures like dragons, no matter what interpretation you get of them, it's always indicated in some shape or form that they are acknowledged to age faster and mature faster. So yeah, Spike may have been a baby when he got hatched, but as he grew and got older, he became more mature in his actions, and that reflected on the age he was basically showcasing. It reflected on the age he was showcasing. And we never knew exactly what his age was. I don't even think in the episode. I don't even think in the episode where he gives Rarity the Fireheart Stone, or whatever it's called. I don't even think in that episode when he had that's one of the parts of this episode is his birthday. I don't think it's ever really showcased. I don't think it's really even acknowledged that he's basically this age or that age. And why? Because they're leaving it up to interpretation. That's what they're doing. They're leaving it up to interpretation. And it's the Fire Ruby, actually. It's the Fire Ruby. And I'm trying to think what the episode's name is. Hold on. Okay, I had to double check. It's Secret of My Excess. But yeah, basically, like I was saying, what was I? Hold on. Let me go on brain fart here. Like I said, he gave her the Fire Ruby and Secret of My Excess, and like I said, Lauren Faust and Nicole Dubuque kind of understood the assignment. But like I said, if you were to rank them and everything, and all that, Nicole would be at the top, and Lauren would be at number 2, and McCarthy would be at 3, because again, Nicole in the latter seasons understood the situation. She did. She understood, the situation and all that. And to me, you don't do certain episodes like Drag and Drop. You don't do like in the earlier season. You don't do something like Secret of My Excess. You don't do the subplot, of the Secret Santa situation of, Spike looking for Rarity and all that, looking for a gift for Rarity. You don't put that as a subplot, you know, in Best Gift Ever. You don't do that. You don't do any of that unless you understand that that you've developed something here that fans want to see. And it's obvious that those behind the show, those behind the show and the series, behind the show and even its spin-offs, they understand that assignment. Even those that worked on the comics, when they were under IDW, understood that assignment. They did. I mean, who's the one that broke the spell finally? Basically, it was like the last piece of that puzzle to free Rarity from being Nightmare Rarity. Who? Spike. Spike was the one. Who was the one that accompanied Rarity in one of the holiday annuals on a date all over the place? Spike. Who wanted to make up to Spike for what was going on? Rarity. Don't you kind of see what I'm saying? I mean, again, people can speculate and everything, and I think this is why I kind of almost lost track when I was trying to find out the episode's name. People can say that Spike's not that is too young and all that, but like I was saying, in Secret of My Excess, where his birthday is a pivot point, a central point, if you will, somewhat of the episode, Spike basically is not, he's not just visually, but he's not verbally heard of having, an age. His age is not mentioned. Because again, as I said earlier, it's meant for interpretation. So when you look at, Spot, look at this relation, you look at this friendship / relationship, however you want to look at it, it's one of those kind of open-ended, romantic ships that you can basically work either way. You can work either way with it. And a lot of people look at, let's say the last problem in the ending visual of the main six on the mound with the sun going down or the sun coming up or something like that. And Rarity's coming right from behind Spike or, something like that, as they finish singing. So basically there's a lot of visual evidence, a lot of visual cues. And to me, I'm like, why try to go against it? When there's so much out there. Why try to, dismiss it when there's so much evidence out there? And this is why a lot of fans, probably more so than I think anybody can really register, are fans of the ship. And the reason they're also fans of the ship is because basically they like the idea that you have someone like Spike, who's essentially the only male in the group, outside of the occasional appearance by Sunburst later on in later seasons, and of course when they go to Canterlot and all that, and they encounter Shining Armor. Spike basically is the only main male of the group, so you can't, you can't blame him for falling for what he would consider probably the prettiest pony, on the team or in the main group. You can't blame him for that. You really can't. I mean, heck, when they did the episode Dragon Drop, you have all the ponies helping Rarity because Spike's helping Gabby. You have all the ponies from Applejack to Rainbow to Pinky, to Fluttershy, and even Twilight, telling her Spike has always had a thing for you. Not outright saying it this way, but basically saying that Spike has had a thing for you since he first met you. That he's always had, he's always had love for you since the first day he saw you. So it's just one of those scenarios, in my opinion, that, you have so much evidence out there visually from a multimedia perspective that it's like fans, it's like fans, it's like fans basically understand, and they sometimes don't want to understand, you know? But what's crazy is there's a lot of fans that are more accepting of it. Like, they may not be fond of it, but they're accepting of it. Like, even those that do reviews, like, let's say Dr. Wolf, and let's say Lightning Bliss, and Josh Scorcher, aka Firebrand, and Silver Quill, and Golden Fox, you know, Keyframe, you know, when they do the reviews, some of them at the start were not totally on board. Like, they kind of found cuteness and adorableness in it, Spike's crush and thing for Rarity, but some of them were not totally on board. But the more evidence that started to come in, the more they started to kind of, I think, accept in a way that it's a potentiality that this could happen, even if it doesn't happen officially on the show. There's going to be something that kind of makes it official, in some shape or form. I think they were more willing to accept that, even, when the show ended, or towards the ending of the show. I really do. And, one person that used to be a supporter of it, Voice of Reason, yeah, he stopped being a supporter of it, but you could definitely tell in a way, that he was actually glad something of, I guess you could say, substance, romance, in this case, was happening. And that you had someone like Spike actually getting the opportunity to, have something to, work towards, kind of achieve as a goal. And, that's kind of cool. I mean, because he did a review. It's still up here on YouTube, where he did a collab with Buck Reviewer. And they were talking about, Spike, because this was for the episode Dragon Quest. And Spike was, questioning, where he came from, who, what's he about and everything. And during the review, the discussion, Voice of Reason brings up the fact that, why would Spike be questioning this from his friends and also his, possible girlfriend, in acknowledging basically Rarity, if you will, when it comes to who he is, what his importance is. And also, I want you to think about this too. Speaking of Dragon Quest, who went along with Rainbow Dash and Twilight to keep an eye on Spike to make sure he was safe? Who? Rarity. That's who. Who's the one that basically, when all three of them were defending him against the other dragons, who's the one that basically said along the lines that, violence isn't her thing and all that, but she says, I'll rip you to pieces if you hurt him, kind of deal. Who was that? Rarity. And it's just, again, even in the earlier Lauren Faust ones, and then the latter Nicole Dubuque ones, like I said, rank-wise, Nicole here, Lauren 2, McCarthy 3, they all understood the assignment of what to do with this pairing. I mean, what about the, between, Dawn and Dusk, or, something like that, the Luna Celestia episode? When Spike gets, basically caught up, with a tree that's getting eaten by this big turtle. Who's the one that runs out of the group right towards him? Rarity. Who's the one that gets paired up together? Who are the ones that get paired up together? In the sunsets, in the summer sunset showdown, whatever the title of the episode is. Who gets paired together to go talk to the people setting up some of the decorations? Spike and Rarity. What's the moment they show in there when they see, like, the fireworks and stuff going off, and they have, like, those little sparkles in the eyes, which is kind of an indicating hint at romance, coupling, if you will, in some cases. Who's together? Spike and Rarity, right? Who are the ones in the climactic battle that are defending each other? Spike and Rarity against Chrysalis. And who combines the powers to try to hold her off a bit before that fails? Spike and Rarity. I mean, again, can you not see the situation? Can you not see it? And then I go back to the comics. I'm just saying. And what's even crazier is when you look at Hasbro's channel, the Hasbro own My Little Pony YouTube channels. One of them has a whole, video, compilation video, if you will, of episodes titled Spike and Rarity's Love Story. Yeah, Love Story. Spike and Rarity's Love Story. And then they have another one now, which came out about 2 years ago. I don't know if it's the same one. I don't think it is, because it's a different thumbnail. But this one is called Valentine's Day, Love and Friendship. And who's on the cover? Who's on the thumbnail? Spike and Rarity from that final scene where they're falling through the sky in Secret of My Excess. You see, even when you have those behind the official MLP YouTube channels, social media, and, Hasbro itself doing stuff like that, even they acknowledge that this was something that happened, and that basically, if they're going to go with it, they're going to run with it, then basically it's official. That's the way they look at it, and I think that's how a lot of fans looked at it. And I think that's why a lot of fans, when they talk about these past episodes, and some of these episodes focus on Spike and Rarity, they're more willingly accepting the fact that, yeah, they're pretty much an item, even though we don't know why even though we don't know why, they're pretty much an item. And that's about it. That's about it. And to me, I like it. I really do. Now, I get that I get the idea they want to pair Spike up with other characters, right? Like Lauren Faust has this little drawing her daughter, I think granddaughter, drew of a female dragon character that she says, oh, that's Spike's girlfriend. It's canon now. Again, that's just her messing around, just messing with the fans, having fun. She knows it's not canon because the dragon character was never in the show. Closest we had was Smolder and Ember. And yeah, fans paired up Spike and Ember and Spike and Smolder together. Yeah, and that's fine. That, from a dragon perspective, that makes sense. It really does. It really does. And, I understand that they like to pair him up with other characters. Again, going back to Gabby, they want to pair him up with her. But not just Gabby. There's pony characters, too. Yeah. You want to know two prolific ones outside of Rarity? Outside of Rarity, they pair him up with Starlight and Applejack. And heck, the Bride of Discord, if you will, fan comic that Disney Disney Fanatic worked on. Guess what? What pairing did she go with there on that one in the one that followed, or the one that preceded it? What pairing? Applejack and Spike. But she had a reason, because it took place because she was basing her stuff off season 4. So she was going in a direction that she felt that, hey, if this was to happen officially, this probably would be what they would do. And that's a fact. That's a fact. But when you get down to it, ladies and gentlemen, when you get down to it, at the end of the day, when you get down to it, this pairing was done for a reasoning. And it was done to make things open-ended for fans to interpret how they wanted the romance to go, if they wanted it to go in that direction. And there's a lot of folks, like myself, George Gazanza, and many, 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 many others that support this ship more so than I think anybody can think of. And if you have, like I said, Hasbro and the people behind the official MLP YouTube channels dedicating compilation videos of episodes to this, to that pairing, or using, part of their interactions romantically, or somewhat quote unquote romantically as a thumbnail, yeah, I think it's case closed. In my opinion, when it comes to whether or not these two are an item, and I believe they are. So that's why they're my official ship. I like the idea. The dynamic just works. It really does. It really, really does. Again, you have Spike, who has a thing for Rarity, and the underlining tone about Dragon Drop is Rarity's waking up and realizing, yeah, she has a thing for Spike. So outside of all that, ladies and gentlemen, I just think it's a cute pairing, and I love the interactions, and Again, this is, to me, this is too much evidence. Way too much evidence, if you will, to say otherwise. So that's it for that pairing. So let's get on to the next one. Alright, so next on the list, obviously it's one I've been talking about recently, and of course, it's Dale and Gadget. I mean, no offense to Chip and Gadget or Dale and Foxglove. I mean, those are believable, don't get me wrong. But to me, as I said before, just like with, Cubby and Sunni, if you will, I think, honestly, the evidence, if you want my honest opinion, the evidence was just too great in the show. And I've mentioned this in the videos I did recently over the past few months, that when you look at all the episodes, you look at all the moments in those episodes, and yeah, you got like two hands full, maybe two hands full and a foot full, or two hands and a foot full, if you will, of episodes that pretty much, in a way, acknowledge, if not kind of basically, and hold on, guys, hold on. All right, sorry about that, guys. I was double checking something, but anyway, like I said, it's like you could hold all the episodes in two hands and 1 foot, basically, and essentially you got a lot of evidence, a lot of proof, in my opinion, that Dale and Gadget was the obvious direction I think they wanted to go. Like I alluded to with Cubby and Sunni, I believe had they gotten to the point, not gotten through, but gotten to the point that they were able to do a series of cinematic movies based on the Disney afternoon shows, and Rescue Rangers being one of them that was in the pipeline, if you will, in potentially happening, then I totally believe, in my honest opinion, I totally believe that, basically that would have been the opportunity that they would have paired Dale and Gadget up. Because again, you got so much evidence in the series that outnumbers all the Chip and Gadget moments, that it's just impossible, it's just impossible not to, take notice of. It's just impossible not to, take notice of, and, kind of, say to yourself, kind of ask yourself, not say, but kind of ask yourself, were they planning to do what I think they were planning to do? Because it's apparent to me that that's exactly what they were going to do. I mean, you take a look at all the moments from the earlier episodes, the season 1 episodes, as they call them, the Disney Channel episodes, to the syndicated ones, if you will, for seasons 2 and 3. And it's just, to me, it's just blatantly obvious. They wanted to do Dale and Gadget romantically, but they didn't want to, I think, honestly, destroy the dynamic that the show was about. Because, like I said, the creators probably looked, the creators, that would get asked these questions, they would basically, give answers to the point that it's essentially them saying, yeah, those moments happened in those episodes, but we're not looking at, those individual episodes. We're looking at the series as a whole. And looking at the series as a whole, they basically say that, or basically in their minds, they're saying, hey, Gadget was more oblivious to the romantic advances or hints in, Easter eggs that Dale and Chip were leaving for her, that she didn't, really like reciprocate it, if you will, like, people would expect her to. Like she did kind of in the earlier episodes and everything, like with, like with calories not included, and so on, and parental discretion retired, and so on. It's just, they never, they basically never, in their minds, saw that happen in the latter portion of the show. But it was there. It was there. I mean, whether or not, is a good, has a nice little moment there between them. Song of the Nightingale basically is kind of hinting at that, with her choosing Dale to be the first test pilot along with her on the Ranger Ring, and so on, and then her hugging him the way she does at the end, saying what she did, or saying, that they were crazy about him, and saying it in the way and embracing him, like I said, in the way she did. It's just too much evidence, in my opinion. And then, of course, go to the earlier episodes again, like I've mentioned. Dale beside herself, really, not herself, but himself. Excuse me. Dale beside himself. Almost had a brain fart there. I'm expecting a phone call in just a little bit, guys, because you know my situation. Those of you who followed me for the past almost 18 years this June. But anyway, though, like I was saying, in Dale beside himself, you know, the ending there where she's embracing him, she's got her leg, you know, her leg, one of her legs up, like, you know, kind of a love gesture, like we've seen before, like when basically, you know, it's seen in shows to where a couple kiss and the girl, if not the guy, if not both, will put a leg up and everything, kind of indicating romance, and that's kind of what you get there with, you know, Gadget doing that hug, and at the end of Dale beside himself. And hold on. All right, sorry about that. That's the phone call I was telling you about. But anyway, though, like I said, just, you know, she has the leg up when she's hugging him and all that, and you know, at the end of Dale beside himself. And what's crazy is I looked on, you know, not looked, but I asked on ChatGPT because we didn't see like anything visually happen after that. We just, you know, saw her hugging him and all that, and then we see it get focused on Chip talking to Zipper, saying it's good to have the little Dale back, and then his reaction, you know, afterwards, like, okay, hugging him, you know, I don't think it's gonna make him, you know, go like, ooh, you know, his eyes are like, you know, kind of like in a, you know, like, woo, okay, that just happened, you know, state, because the expression Dale had afterwards, you know, when Monterey's going up to him and saying, you know, one of you is better than nothing or something like that, or aliens have nothing on him, or, you know, to an extent, you know, before, you know, the episode ended, you know, the expression Dale had, you know, was more along the lines of, yeah, she hugged him, but she may have also kissed him on the dang cheek or lips. We don't know. Again, left up to interpretation. Left up to interpretation, if you will. But again, when you really look at, like I said, you really look at this, you know, this pairing, if you will, in the show, in the moments they had, Carpet Snaggers, what I just mentioned with Dale beside himself, him taking advantage of the whole Gadgets in the Mood situation at the beginning of Categories Not Included, the first episode, you know, kind of setting off the chain of events that would happen throughout the series when it comes to him and Chip competing for her. And, you know, then you look at, like I said, the second season, the syndicated ones and all that, and you see, you know, her going out all the way to help Dale make him, you know, relive his dream of being a spy. I mean, come on. If somebody was just friends with you and all that, they wouldn't go all the way like she did. Let's be honest with ourselves, okay? Dressing up in a red dress, wig, thick lipstick, eyeshadow and everything, and then acting the way she did, and then kissing him the way she did. I mean, come on, you don't do that if you're just friends. It's like there's something there. And little key point about that kiss. She kind of like, you know, she kind of basically kind of like thought about it for a second. Like she kind of like, you know, she kind of did like a gasp kind of thing, like a breathe in or something like that. And then all of a sudden she just kissed him. Like, it's like something just snapped in her head, like, do it. Just do it. And then her excuse or reasoning towards Chip, like when he says you didn't have to kiss him, and then her saying, well, you know, I thought, isn't that some? And her answer to Chip is, golly, isn't that what spies are supposed to do? I think sometimes you can interpret that like, you know, if you want to look at it from this perspective, her coming up with like, okay, what am I going to say? And her being who she is, she's going to get an answer real quickly, so that's the answer she came up with. But come on, you can't tell me that she didn't, like, you know, not hesitate or not really think about what she was about to do, because she did. It's like there was that attraction, that the attraction, you know, switch just went off and said, do it, girl. He's right there, do it. He doesn't know it's you, but do it. This is your opportunity. And she did it. And then you take a look outside of that, you take a look at RoboCat, you know, and so on. It's like, you know, it's like you look at all these episodes, like I mentioned, and more to even not even name, but they're there. They are there. It's, again, it's just so obvious that you see the direction they wanted to go in with these two. You do. And like I mentioned earlier with Cubbi and Sunni, yeah, they decided to finally pair her up with somebody. They could have pivoted. They could do the pivot and say, oh, actually she's going to be with Chip, or she's going to be with this new OG character. Yeah, they could have done that, but they didn't. They didn't. And yeah, it's open to interpretation of who she was going to end up with. But when you really look at it from a perspective of, visual evidence, it was obvious she was going to be with Dale. And when you have Tad Stones at one point, even though he basically told me when I put this out there when I did my video, and I responded back to him, and he responded back to me, and it was all respectful, nothing bad or anything. But Tad Stones at one point, in like an interview or something like that he did years ago, he essentially said that if she was going to end up with anybody, it would have been Dale. And I think the way he was alluding to it, and I mentioned this in a video, I think it's more like from a story perspective. Like, if they were told, okay, do a story where she's got to choose, then obviously they were going to pair her with Dale. Like, if they're told, like, hey, do a special episode or a mini movie or whatever where she chooses, who she's going to be with. And I think that's what they were alluding to, or Tad was kind of alluding to in that interview, that from a story perspective, it would have been Dale and nobody else. It would have been him. Because of the natural chemistry and understanding between the two. I think that's why, he said what he did, even though he doesn't, stick by it. I think that's what he was alluding at, in my opinion. But when you have the creators coming out saying, hey, she was just too obvious to it, they're not looking, like I said earlier, at the episodes that are two hands and a foot full that you can, look at, as, evidence, she knew about, the attraction the guys had towards her and were giving her and vice versa and stuff like that. They're looking at the series as a whole, and as a whole, she's oblivious. She doesn't see it. She doesn't understand. She doesn't acknowledge it, if you will. So outside of that, though, I think if they were to look at the episodes people have talked about, like Double O Chipmunk, Carpet Snaggers, Dale Beside Himself, Calories Not Included, Song of the Nightingale, Double O Chipmunk, RoboCat, if you will, Whether or Not, and so on. I think if you look at those episodes and a few others, it's just way too obvious. It's way too obvious. If they were to look at it, I should say, not just us because we've seen it, but if they were to look at it, if you will, that being the creators, look at those episodes I mentioned as well as some others. I think they would realize why it's too obvious to us, why we believe that's the direction they would have gone in. And again, to me, I think the chemistry between them just works. It just works. They're both, very fun. They love having fun, but they're also very creative and imaginative. I mean, Gadget's expression when she saw what Dale had done, creating his spy suit. I mean, come on. Who wouldn't be happy at the fact that, oh, cool, I got a fellow inventor on the team, and I didn't know it? I mean, come on. You can't tell me that doesn't make her want to be attracted to him more so than anything? Or want to help him out the way she does because she understands maybe where he's coming from? I mean, again, just you point that episode, and like I said, the other ones that I've mentioned along with a few others, and it's just, to the creators, you have them sit down and watch those. And again, I think honestly they would understand why we feel this way, why it feels like that, was the, direction we believe they were going in. And I still do. But honestly, though, like I said, to me, the pairing between them, the chemistry just works. And like I said, as I mentioned earlier, nothing against Chip and Gadget, nothing against Dale and Foxglove. Those would work no matter how they're done. I do agree with that. But I think it's just obvious that if you were just to go straightforward and everything, just go straight forward with, okay, who could we pair up with who, if you will, romantically? Who can we pair up with who romantically in the show? If they had to do it from a story perspective, then I think they'd be correct to go with Dale, because that's, like I said, that's the answer Tad Stone made it sound like they would end up doing from a story perspective. But to me, naturally though, it's just the chemistry they have for each other, the chemistry that works between them, the understanding, they're both creative and imaginative, and they're willing to help others out. So I'm totally, that's why I'm totally on board, always have been on board since the beginning of the show, of these two being an item. But now, let's get on to the next one, guys, shall we? Alright, so the next one, of course you can see it, it's Bonkers and Fawn. I mean, look, when you look at Bonkers and Fawn, from the Bonkers show, and Raw Tunage by extension, yeah, it does remind people somewhat of the, Roger Rabbit, Jessica Rabbit dynamic, but, not entirely. Yeah, it was inspired by it. But I think really when you think about inspiration, the concept of Bonkers and Raw Tunage by extension, they were inspired not just by Roger Rabbit, but by Saturday Night Live. That's what they were, inspired by. I think honestly more in living color for Raw Tunage than Saturday Night Live, if you catch my drift. But anyway, basically, they were inspired by both Roger Rabbit and, like I said, by extension, the whole In Living Color Saturday Night Live deal. But honestly, I think the other inspiration they had was Mickey and Minnie. And the reason I say that is because, well, Fawn, she has a ribbon in her hair. She's wearing a ribbon in her hair, right? Who else wore a ribbon outside of Daisy? And even later on, Clarabelle? Minnie. So obviously there's your inspiration there. And when I look at these two, yeah, mostly they were used for the Raw Tunage, the He's Bonkers cartoon shorts there that got migrated over to the Bonkers television show. Yeah, they mostly interacted in those, but you had her in the other show, in the regular episodes as well. I mean, she was in the pilot, Going Bonkers, where she told Bonkers they'd stand by them, or stand by his side. Heck, she was the last one to get kidnapped, and if she hadn't gotten kidnapped, she probably would have joined Bonkers on the police force, let's be honest. Or at least join the police force, maybe as a secretary or something that would get on the action once in a while. Who knows? But you had her there. You had her in New Partners on the Block, where she's telling Fall Apart, when the recipe calls a can of peppers, it doesn't mean a little can of peppers and all that. And she's also one of the first to look at the can that has writing on it. When they're looking through the cans, ciphering through the cans. So she's had roles, speaking roles, outside of like the He's Bonkers shorts and everything. Heck, she was kind of a little bit of a plot point in Casa Bonkers. The end, the beginning and the end, if you know what I mean. That episode. She was also in one of the dream sequences for the Toon's Dream of Animated Sheep. I think that's what it was called, that episode. So she's had roles, she's had moments. Cameos, speaking, non-speaking, she's had them. She's had them. But the thing is with her is, see, to me, when it comes to her and Bonkers' relationship, it's like an open book. Like, you could do anything you want with these characters. You can. You could do anything you want with Fawn. You could do anything you want with Bonkers as an item. You could do it. And it would work, in my opinion. Heck, she was you want to know what kind of important character she was? They had her at the beginning and the end of a Disney Adventures Bonkers comic, called Nose on the Run, where Bonkers is asking her to go to the policeman's ball with him, and she accepts. And she's talking. And oh, by the way, that story is supposed to take place during the Lucky Paquel episodes, where she barely had any presence except outside of a cameo in a flashback, or just an extra cameo, if you will, in the background for an episode. And that was it. That was it. So to me, again, this relationship is just an open-ended book. It's just an open book, if you will. Not open-ended, but an open book that you can play with. You can write things down in, kind of ideas in directions you want to go in. She's that kind of a character. And I believe if they were to ever reboot the Bonkers perspective, the Bonkers character and show, and bring her and the other characters back, I honestly believe in this day and age, they'd have her do a lot more. They'd probably have her be a little bit more wacky in everything. I wouldn't be surprised by that. They'd probably have her do the lustful milk cake. Well, I know, where she melts into a puddle of goo. I don't know. But again, that's the kind of character she is. She's not one-dimensional and all that. As some people might perceive her as just being the love interest of Bonkers. Because when you look at the He's Bonkers shorts, she's obviously capable of doing a lot more. She really is. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, okay. So the episode Bonkers in Space, Bonkers in Space, she's in that, she's a vital part of that little mini episode. She is. So it's kind of cool to see, and I think that kind of gave you a hint of, hey, they wanted to do more with her, they could have. They could have done more with her and everything. So, to me, I look at the fact that, yeah, it should have gotten more prominence than it did. But what we saw with these two, I thought was cool. I thought it was really cool and everything. I mean, she can even be very snarky. She can be very snarky. Like, they did the Thanksgiving short called Gobble Gobble Bonkers, right? Which is one of the only rare holiday things they've done. And basically, she's playing the role of Grumbles' daughter, right? Because it's supposed to be acting. It's supposed to be like an acting thing they're doing, a little mini movie. And she's, asking, she's, asking, Grumbles as her dad. She's like, Daddy, why do we have to come to the New World? It's cold here. And Grumbles' answer is, cold's good for you. He says something along the lines of, well, cold's good for you. He says something along like that. I'm trying to think of what he said. I do apologize if it sounds like I'm going silent or something like that. I do apologize. But he says something along the lines of, cold's good for you. So it's like something like sharpens your senses, heightens your, sharpens your eyes, sharpens your senses or heightens your senses or something like that. And then he has a big old lump of snow fall right through him, fall right on him through the roof. And Fawn's remark is, it raises our insurance. I mean, she can be snarky. She can be. And I like that because you don't expect watching something like that, thinking, okay, she's not going to say anything after he has something like that fall down. She's probably going to go over to him and help him out and all that. No, instead she ends up being snarky because, again, when she's asking, why do we have to come to the New World? It's cold here, and he's like, cold's good for you. Heightens your sense. Basically sharpens your eyes, heightens your senses, and boom, down comes the snow from the roof. And her remark is, it raises our insurance. I mean, come on. You could have done a lot more with her. There's no doubt, and that's why I look at her as an open book, character. And her relationship with Bonkers is an open book one because you could do so much with it. So much. And when you look at the episode cast of Bonkers, the ending, if you will, where Bonkers goes up to her, and she's happy to, kind of like happy to see him, kind of, I guess, shy, kind of doing the play hard to get deal. And they're walking off together, and he telling her she's his one and only, and holding her like this, and she has no problem with that. It's like, come on, you're basically saying at the end of that episode, yeah, they're boyfriend, girlfriend. If it wasn't official before, it's official now. So to me, I look at it, and I think it's a cute little pairing. I really do. It's an adorable, cute little pairing, romantic pairing, if you will, that is an open book that you could still, continuously write about and have chapters to and moments and stuff like that. So that's why I like it. That's why I like it, because again, it reminds me, of not just Roger Rabbit and Jessica Rabbit, but the inspiration of Mickey and Minnie is in there as well. But I like it because you could do so much more with it than, what you saw. It's basically an open book, if you will, that you could still jot down notes and everything for. Jot down notes for and everything. So I like it. I really do. I really do. But that's all I'm going to say for that one. Now to the final one. Alright, so we are on to basically the final one. And like I say, this is not in order, any top tens, nothing like that. It's just 5 I want to talk about. And of course, the final one, I should say, that I want to talk about, of course, is Sonic and Sally. Let's be honest, we all knew that was coming. We all knew that was coming. Sonic and Sally. And what has been said about this pairing that no one else has said, even me? I mean, it just works. It is just a very, very good pairing. I mean, from the get-go, even from the earlier releases, of the comic, from its miniseries origins up to its, status quo as the longest licensed video game comic in history, even to this day, you know, it was pretty much set up from that time frame, and even with the animated series, that these two were going to be together. It was. All the evidence, if you will, all the evidence, out there, if you will, in the show, in the comics, if you will, and even beyond, it's just too great to say, oh, that they were never going to be an item, because visually, we all saw it. We all saw it happen. We all saw them become an item in the cartoon and in various times in the comic. And this is why people are very defensible when it comes to others kind of being against them, because it's like, yeah, we understand where you're coming from with Sonic and Amy, or Sonic and Blaze, and Sonic and Tangle, because yes, there's people that want Sonic and Tangled, and even some that want Sonic and Whisper, and even people that want Sonic and Lanolin, because Lanolin kind of reminds them a little bit of Sally in some aspects. It's understandable that they, would want, Sonic to be with others, instead of, Sally, and that's fine. That's a right to their opinion. But the thing is, from the get-go, like I said, these two were pretty much set up to be an item. They were pretty much set up to be, the end goal, if you will, the end game, quote unquote, to paraphrase, of of the entire storyline, from a romantic standpoint. They were. I mean, you take a look at, as I've alluded to on many occasions, you take a look at the Monkey Con situation with Sally doing the Iron Dominion, and that was just, set up to get her back with Sonic. That was just her pulling what's known as like a Zach Morris, Kelly Kapowski kind of situation, to where she's dating somebody else outside of Sonic to try to see where her heart, really lies. And all she's being reminded of, because he has similar techniques and antics and all that, is her heart lies with Sonic. And that she can't, really be sure of herself being able to move on unless she's fair to the one she's always had, a love for, the one that she's always been, true to since the beginning. So basically, you have, this relationship that just, it just works from the ground up, because essentially they are both foils, believe it or not. They are both foils for each other. Yeah, they're both foils. Sonic can sometimes get one over on her, and she can always get one over on Sonic. No matter how people feel about it. And that's what makes the relationship work. It's basically the old opposites attract. Sally is attracted to that free lifestyle, that freelance lifestyle that Sonic is about, and he's attractive to somebody that takes charge, that wants to get the job done, and is wanting to do the right thing at the same time to save the planet. So there's that opposites attract kind of situation. And when you look at the fact that in various interpretations, the Satam cartoon and even the Archie comics, they've been friends since they were kids, and being best friends, if you will, and then that best friendship just blossomed into something more. We pretty much saw that happen. We pretty much saw that happen with our own eyes, and it's always cool to see. It's always cool to see. So I have never had anything against this pairing. I've always been happy about it. I mean, heck, I've said this before. I'll say it again. I've said this before. I'll say it again. When I was living on my own, and this is a fact. This is a fact, okay? When I was living on my own, and I saw what the preview cover for I think it was 123 was going to be, and then I read 123, and I saw what happened in 123, I was excited to the point that I was rolling on the floor in excitement and happiness. That's no joke. That's no joke. Living on my own in my apartment, I was that happy. Because basically, they should have never been separated from the get-go. They never should have been put through any of the situations they were put through during that time. They should have been together, boyfriend and girlfriend, and nothing coming between them. That's what they should have been. That's what they should have been. But except you have different writers coming in and saying, nope, we got to do this. Nope, we got to do that. Nope, we got to put a slap in there that wasn't supposed to be, that shouldn't have been in there in the first place. And it was the artist that went a little too far with it, not the writing, and so forth. It's like, we didn't need all this unnecessary, drama in this story. We just needed it to where we know they still love each other, they still care about each other, but they're willing to put the romance, the love, if you will, their engagement, if you will, the courtship, the consortship, if you will, on the bench, on the shelf for the time being, and focus on saving the world. We just needed that. We didn't need all this unnecessary will they, won't they, let's put some other people in there and try to make people think. We didn't need that. We didn't need that. Just simplify, to the point of, let's just have them agree to put their the consortship, their engagement, if you will. Have them put that onto, onto the shelf, onto the table, if you will, for the time being, until things are settled down, until they can basically make sure or be assured that the planet is in no danger, that their main enemy is pretty much down and out, or at least put into a situation to where he's definitely got to take years to get back on his feet, and then try to go from there and see what happens. That's all they needed to do. We didn't need the unnecessary drama, like I said. We didn't need that, but we got it anyway. Unfortunately, we got it anyway. But when I look outside of that, though, it just works. It just really, really works. And the best way this is shown, in my opinion, is Doomsday, the Doomsday Project episode, when Sonic's getting ready to go off on his own again. Sally's with him. She's got the Power Stones, and she's saying, telling him the plan, like when we connect the stones. Sonic at first is like, whoa, what's this we stuff? And then she's saying, I'm going with you, and everything. And Sonic's like, no way, Al. This is so. And then she quiets him. She puts her hand, I should say, over his mouth, if you will. Because he's saying, he's trying to tell her, no way, Sal, and then she does, like I said, she puts her hand on his mouth, and she says, and she emphasizes this. She says, we are in this together. Not just you anymore. It's we. We are in this together, no matter what happens. And Sonic's reaction when he hears that is like, it's like, now it's dawning, because now it's dawning on him that she's saying, you die, I die. You save the world, we save the world. We do it together with each other. And in Sonic's reaction, when she asks him check, he kisses her on the head and says check, because now he understands that she loves him, and that if she's going to fall in battle, she's going to fall with him. And that right there is probably the best evidence you need probably in the history of the Sonic franchise to know that their pairing is, that this is why their pairing, I should say, is so beloved. It's so beloved. And there's no way getting around that. There isn't. There is no way getting around that when you really think about it. Because, again, you have them working together, you have them going through all these situations together, and it only makes it stronger for them. It only makes them stronger. Now, I know some people will point out, well, the reboot kind of, kiboshed that. The soft reboot kiboshed that. Yeah, it did. And it's mainly because of one reason. It kiboshed it Because Ian Flynn got sick and tired of fans not just, leaving well enough alone. I mean, let's be honest with ourselves, okay? Let's be honest. Flat out. Ian Flynn was a fan and a supporter of Sonic and Sally. We know that. We could, other people could say otherwise, but he wouldn't have done what he did after Iron Dominion if he wasn't a fan. He wouldn't have done that, okay? So he is a fan. He's always been supportive of them. But the fact is, he couldn't continue that relationship even if his original plans, let me correct myself. When it came to the reboot, he couldn't continue that relationship because even during the original run, people just could not leave well enough alone and accept the fact that, okay, Sonic's with Sally, he's not with Amy. So, and just leave it at that. He just got sick and tired of the back and forth. And he just wanted fans to be more accepting and understanding of the situation, but they weren't. They weren't. And that pretty much made him decide, you know what? If they can't accept Sonic being with Sally, and so on, then you know what? We're not going to have them be together at all. And we're just going to tease Sonic being bisexual. I mean, not Sonic, but we're going to tease Sally being bisexual, mostly leaning more towards lesbian. That's what happened. That's what happened, all because fans couldn't just leave well enough alone and be like, hey, he's going to pair Sonic up with Sally? Cool with us. And that's it. Just leave well enough alone. But yeah, basically he too was a fan, but he was left with no choice. I mean, I'll be honest, if I was in his position, thankfully I'm not, but if I was in his position, I probably would have done the same thing. Or basically, let me correct myself. I probably would have done the same thing, but then I would have probably not only put them back together, but I would send out a message saying, look, yes, they are going to get back together in the story, and if you don't like it, you could stop reading. That's what I would have said. If I was Ian Flynn and I decided, hey, even in the reboot, I'm going to put them back together, I would have said, I'm putting them together, and if you don't like it, you don't have to read. But he didn't do that. He didn't do it. He just decided, you know what? You don't want to accept it? I'm taking it away. And he did. I think Ian did kind of hint a little bit of there being an attraction between the two still in the reboot, but it wasn't like it was before. It wasn't. He just decided, hey, you don't want it? You don't want to accept it? You don't want to leave well enough alone? Then fine. You're not going to have a nice thing to read or a nice thing to play with. And he took it away. But outside of that, fans are always going to be supportive of it. Fans are always going to incorporate it into their stories. I mean, you look at a lot of the fan comics that are continuations of, the Mecha Sally arc. You look at all the, like I said, all the stories where they're, continuing the series. You look at Mobius Comics. You look at Sonic the Hedgehog Online, which is a continuation of 248 and 247 and all that and beyond. You take a look at, Archie Sonic Restored, which is coming up and everything. If not, it's already out there, at least the first issue or so. And they right there, those people understand that, from a romantic standpoint, you got to go the Sonic and Sally route. Whether you like it or you don't. I mean, even, like I said, Mobius Comics, which, is also in that category. Excuse me there. Basically, they understand it, and they take it up a notch because they're more for the they're more for the mid to older teen racket, if you will, a young adult racket than anything, because let's just put it this way. The most recent page, or one of the more recent pages, had Sonic and Sally finally do it to it, if you know what I mean. Even after Sally kind of teased them of, you know what, you're not going to get any for a year, and yeah, she couldn't hold that. Couldn't hold herself to that. But anyway, yeah, even fan comics understand it. They do. Some fan, and here's the other thing, some fan comics don't understand it. Well, they do, but they're not fond of it. They're not fans of it. A good example, as I've talked about recently, and Cyberpunk Jordan, if you will, on his channel in a recent video talked about too, there are some people behind certain fan comics, like Archie Sonic Forever, that are not fond of Sonic and Sally being an item, and they'd rather have Sally be with Nicole. Which again, if you're a fan of Nicole and Sally, more power to you. Because obviously that was the direction they were teasing in the post-reboot, especially with Spark of Life. the Sonic Universe story. But outside of that, it's like every other fan comic that's come, that's come after the whole after the whole pre-reboot situation, and even post-reboot, has paired them up. They've paired them up as an item. They've kept them paired up. And just build it from there. Because they know basically you can't have a comic like Sonic the Hedgehog, even if it's a fan continuation of the original Archie pre-reboot or post-reboot, you can't have it unless you have the heart and soul of it, and that's the relationship, the love, romantic relationship, boyfriend-girlfriend relationship of Sonic and Sally. They know you can't. They know you can't. I mean, this is why Ian Flynn and Ken Penders separately with the Mobius years later, this is why they would put Sonic and Sally as an item. This is why when Ian Flynn did the continuation of Mobius 25 years later, and Sonic, basically, along with the help of Lawless Sue, stopped Shadow and everything, and it's acknowledged that both Shadow and Sally and Tails and Knuckles and everything know about the alternate timeline, and, because Sally's basically right away receptive of taking Sonic, as her king and everything, because she has those memories. It's like Ian Flynn didn't have to do that, but he did. The point is, even in the official comics, you look at the future timeline as, connected to the prime timeline, or you look at it as an alternate timeline, whatever the case may be, and whoever's writing it, even they understand that basically you got to have Sonic and Sally in there because they're the heart and soul. They are. They are the heart and soul of that comic. End of discussion. So, long story short, ladies and gentlemen, long story short, at the end of the day, when you look at what this pairing's been about and everything they've gone through, can you not wonder why fans are, there's a huge fan base out there that loves them, that wants to see them together, and will incorporate them no matter what the situation? Can you not understand that now? Why they, behind this ship, why they want it to continue, and why they hope for her return in the games, and maybe even hope for her return officially on panel screen in the IDW books, and maybe do something teasingly of a romantic standpoint with her and Sonic? Do you not understand now? It's because they have a great chemistry and dynamic, and it's that situation, like I said before, I think with Dale and Gadget, it's opposite, actually it's more with them than anything, but still, it's the old opposites attract deal. That's what it is, and it's one of the best examples of it working. It really is. So, that's all I'm going to say for them, and yeah, that's about it. So guys, thank you all for listening and watching. Let me know if you agree with some of the pairings I had here. Like I said, this is not an official, top 5 or anything. It's just 5 pairings, romantic pairings that I'm a fan of, that I support, and everything. So let me know what your thoughts are, down below in the comment section, as well as in the live chat. Well, you probably already did it in the live chat, but let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below and everything. And until then, I will talk to you all later. Support me outside of YouTube. Click on the links in the description to help me out. And until then, I am out.